When it comes to history studies, it is not meant to be a mirror. We're not supposed to gaze into it searching for our own reflection, hoping to see ourselves as noble or justified. When we treat history like a mirror, we cherry-pick facts that make us feel good and ignore the parts that make us uncomfortable. And we use the past to validate our current worldview. That's not learning. It's propaganda, and it's incredibly dangerous. Instead, we should use history as a map to show us where we've been, where we've stumbled, and what paths led to progress or catastrophe. And with the rise of authoritarianism, it's more critical now than ever to use that map to guide us. In the 1930s, for example, fascist regimes came to power using all sorts of tactics, promising to restore greatness, blaming vulnerable groups for national decline, and dismantling democratic norms from within. So let's examine what's happening nowadays and how it can go back to history. First, there's the demonization of immigrants and minorities. History remembers how policies driven by xenophobia and fear led to the Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment camps, Jim Crow laws, and other examples. When today's politicians and media figures recycle invasion rhetoric or push discriminatory laws under the guise of security or morality, they're following a dark path that we've walked before. And there's also the widening wealth gap. We've seen time and again, whether it was during the Gilded Age or the collapse of ancient Rome, that when a society becomes too unequal, instability follows. When the middle and working classes are squeezed while elites accumulate unprecedented power, discontent festers. Populist movements rise, and sometimes they demand justice. Sometimes they pave the way for tyranny. And then there's climate denial. That's a slow-motion repeat of countless ignored warnings throughout history. Societies that failed to adapt to environmental pressures like the Mayans or Easter Islanders suffered collapse. We're armed with more data than ever before, but still flirting with the same fatal arrogance, the belief that we're somehow exempt from natural consequences. Studying history objectively means removing our personal ego from the equation. It means listening to multiple sources, especially those voices history tried to silence. It's about asking not just what happened, but why, and who benefited, and who suffered. Being willing to see the good and the bad, the beauty and the horror, is absolutely essential. Because if history is a map, we're the ones holding the pen now, and it's up to us not to walk in circles. So then what can we do as everyday citizens? We can read widely and critically, not just the history that flatters our nation or our politics, but the histories that challenge us. We can support public education, libraries, and honest journalism. We can teach our children to ask questions instead of memorize slogans. We can vote, not just for candidates, but for values rooted in justice, equity, and truth. We can show up in our communities, push back against injustice, and refuse to be silent when history begins to rhyme. Because while history doesn't repeat itself exactly, it does echo. And whether we amplify that echo or break the cycle is entirely up to us.